in the previous video, we looked into how we as a growth team can use the VLOOKUP function to look up empty cells. However, the VLOOKUP has a certain constraint, which is that it can only look up vertically from left to right. So if you want to look up from right to left, we have to use a combination of the index and match functions. So this video, we're going to cover how that will work. So to illustrate this problem, in the prior video, we looked up the interval from our plants table. So in this case, we looked at the plant ID and then looked to the right in the second column to find out which ID it is. So the VLOOKUP function works the way that it looks the plant ID in C2 on our table and then goes into the second column. All right, so it might be that in your data set, instead of having plant IDs in the first column, you have them in a column somewhere in the middle. So you actually want to start looking from here and then look to the left. So with VLOOKUP, this is not possible. So you have to use an alternative. And the alternative here is a combination of index and match. So to illustrate how this works, we can just keep them both in there. So let's say we keep the plant ID there so that we have our data appearing in here. Let's see, does this still work? Plants A to C. Yes, that still works. So an alternative to the VLOOKUP is a combination of index and match. So the index function works the way that it takes a reference and then it takes the row number and the column number to find the particular value. So in our case, we want to look up the plant ID. So we go into our plants and then we select this table. And what we then would like to do is say we want to have these, let's take the fourth. So the fourth cell in column B. So we want to take the fourth row and the second column. So that should return year. So this is returning 50. So that's not good. So what's happening? It's taking the third row. So why is that? Because we're in B to D. So instead of the fourth row, so it's the fourth column, first row, year. Okay, so the problem here obviously that you can't manually put in these 4 and 1s all the time. So we can look up the 4 value and the 1 value using a match function. So to show you that, if we do match, search key. So in this case, we're looking for, let's take the plan ID. So we're looking for the plan and we're looking this in this column. Okay, so this returns the 4. And now we want to have the 1 as well. So index match, so it's the match function. Search key will be the interval. And we want to look that up in the first row. So this gives us the 1. So if we now combine these functions, we have it in one go. So let's do that. So we want to replace the 4 with match. And we want to look up plant ID. And let's freeze the plant ID on column C. Column C. And then we'll look it up in column D. Okay. And then we want to do a match on the search key of interval. And we want to freeze that in cell G1. And then look this up in this table. Okay, so let's see if that works. So that worked, that gives us year. Only thing that's missing is our error. So we want to end with a quotation mark and then start with if error. So if error, then nothing happened. And if we then paste this in all cells, so Control C, Control V, let's see what happens. So nothing happens. So something is wrong here. So what's the case? So it turns out that we haven't frozen one value, which is the blue. So this one seems to change every time we move down. So that's not great, so we have to freeze those as well. F4, and if we now drag it all the way down, we see this happening. Okay, so that seems to work. We just scroll through our data to make sure that it's actually the same. We see that here it says interval. So that seems wrong. So what's happening there? So it takes the right plan ID, it takes the right interval. So there seems to be a 1 here. So what's this 1 for? So we don't want that. Okay, let's see what happens if we remove that. Nothing happens. So the match function is probably wrong in this case. So we can just go into our cheat sheet and go to search for match. We see that there is a search type parameter that we can give. So if we put that to 0, it will find the exact match. If we put that to 1, it finds the most appropriate, like the first match that looks closest. So what happens if we add 0 here and 0 there? So it still finds everything, and now it finds the correct value. So it's important to include those parameters and to always look at what does Google actually want. So if you have index, see it wants a reference, it wants a row and a column. But if we do match, it wants to have a particular search type, and explains here below like what this search type actually means. So if it's unclear, you can find it there. But in this case, we can therefore look up these values from left to right using VLOOKUP, but also from right to left using index and match. So that should be very helpful in particular data sets. If it's still unclear, just let me know. Happy to help you out. Just leave a comment or a question, and otherwise I'll see you in the next video.